Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I just wanted to welcome you all to the 2020 Virtual National Student Parent Support Symposium. For those of you who joined us for this morning's session, welcome back, and welcome to those who are joining us for the first time this afternoon. My name is Jessica Parent, and I'm the Program Manager for the Access Collaborative Program, and I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Before we get started, I just wanted to briefly share with you a little bit about the Access Program at OSU. The Access Program is an academic and social support program to assist parenting students who are earning their college degrees at The Ohio State University. We offer a variety of services to the parenting students in our programs, such as programming on parenting and life skills, childcare and housing assistance, and scholarship opportunities. Since 2005, our program has organized and offered the National Student Parent Support Symposium with the purpose of bringing together students and community and higher ed professionals like yourselves to discuss best practices when supporting post-secondary parenting students and their families. The SPSS focuses on how to empower this unique college population while helping them overcome barriers that may keep them from graduation. Although this is an abbreviated and virtual version of the SPSS, we are hopeful that it will still be just as impactful. With that being said, I would like to introduce our speakers for this afternoon's session. Today we have with us Lindsay Reichland-Cruz and Portia Polk. Lindsay is the study director at the Institute for Women's Policy Research, and Portia is a program associate with Ascend at the Aspen Institute. Lindsay and Portia will co-present on policy changes that will impact parenting students and the supports offered at institutions. They will also shed some light on legislation related to federal COVID-19 pandemic responses. Lindsay and Portia, welcome to the session.
Thank you.
And Portia, I believe your portion is up first.
I am. I can't start sharing until you have stopped sharing. Okay. Okay, everyone should be able to see my screen now. So welcome and good afternoon. As she mentioned, my name is Portia Polk, and I am a program associate for our Post-Secondary Success for Parents initiative at Ascend at the Aspen Institute. I've spent a long time working in K-12 and recently transitioned to higher ed with a focus on students who are parents. So I'm really happy to be here and happy that we were able to turn this into a virtual session. So today I'll be talking about the institutional responses to COVID, both their implications for students who are parents, but more broadly, how it's impacting student enrollment and students in general. Okay, so for those of you that are not familiar with the Aspen Institute, we are a hybrid think tank of sorts, dedicated to solving social issues around the world. We've been around since 1949, and we're born in Aspen, Colorado, but we also have offices in DC and New York. We have approximately 34 policy programs, including Ascend, which is the program that I work for, and we have over 10 leadership programs. Ascend at the Aspen Institute, one of our policy programs, is focused on moving families towards economic security. And we do that mainly through the 2-gen approach, which I will share more about later. But the way in which we move towards economic mobility and focus on solutions that support families in that way are through convening and communicating. If you're familiar with Aspen, you know we do a lot of convenings all the time, and Ascend specifically is no different. Building leadership and national networks, there are many fellowships for each policy program. Ascend has its own fellowship, and we, the Post-Secondary Success for Parents initiative, have a number of advisory groups with whom we work, and then advancing practice and policy solutions. And when we say policy, we mean big P, like federal legislation, state legislation, and little p, right, which is what I'll be talking about today, the rules that dictate how you can move on a campus that aren't necessarily related to any type of legislation. So as I mentioned earlier, we are focused on the 2-gen approach, and the 2-gen approach is about creating opportunities and providing services that serve both the parents and the children together. So this is called a number of different things. whole family approach, multi-gen. In Hawaii, it's Ohana Nui, but all of it is the same as 2-gen, right? It's about serving children and the adults or the caregivers in their lives at the same time. A very familiar example of this is Head Start programs, right? Where children receive child care, but their parents also receive some type of professional development as well. We know that the only way to secure a positive future for the entire family is when we support both together. So within the 2-gen approach, there are several components, 5. Education, economic assets, social capital, and health and well-being. And these create a legacy of economic security that passes from one generation to the next. Service entry points like quality early education for children and post-secondary education, which we'll be focusing on, and employment pathways for parents, are central to approaches that move the whole family towards economic security. And sometimes, you know, folks wonder why a 2-gen approach specifically. So we like to highlight that, 1, a college degree doubles a parent's income. So that's why we focus a lot on post-secondary, but also doubling the income, a $3,000 increase during early childhood yields a 17% increase in adult earnings. And that changes the entire trajectory of the children of those parents and the family overall. So within Ascend, we focus, or we have a group focused on the post-secondary success of students who are parents. This was made possible through a partnership with Imaginable Futures and the ECMC Foundation. And its goal is to raise awareness of and share recommendations that support students who are parents. This initiative began in 2018, in July of 2018, and it started out of a working group at Ascend. As you noted with the 2-gen component, post-secondary education and employment pathways have always been an interest of ours and have always been critical to the 2-gen approach. And we took that working group and made it into a body of work. This group is heavily informed by a number of advisors that I mentioned earlier, but one that I want to focus on is our parent advisors. We have 11 in this second phase. In our first phase, we had 16, and those parent advisors are former or current students who are parents, and they provide their expertise based on their lived experience for the work that we do. They influence our publications and are present at all of our convenings, and you'll see mention of them throughout this presentation. So some of the key challenges and barriers to 2-gen implementation include a lack of clear collaboration partners and or terms of agreement, staff buy-in and capacity, parent recruitment and retention, knowledge of and access to blended funding streams, and different policy barriers, right? A lack of aligned resources and policies. And the interesting thing is that with COVID-19 upon us, it threatens to be a much larger barrier than all of these, because it can lead to all of these challenges to implementing the 2-gen approach. Oops, forgot that I added that. So what I would like for everyone to do is to think about what student parents are most concerned about during this pandemic. And if you used Poll Everywhere before, you'll text Sheila Polk 916 to the number 22333. Then you'll be permitted to join, and then if you'll just share one word that you think student parents are most concerned about, and I'll participate as well. So again, the number that you're texting is 22333. And you're going to text the word Sheila Polk 916, then you'll be allowed to join, and then you'll just text one word that you think students who are parents are thinking about. Okay, great. This is a word cloud, so childcare is becoming larger because a lot of people are choosing childcare. And we hear about it often as one of the largest concerns for students who are parents. Right, finances, of course. If you were or had low income prior to COVID-19, then of course this exacerbates it. juggling. I'm sure many of you have read the Inside Higher Ed article about time poverty. Students who are parents already have difficulty just with the amount of time that they have available to both be a student, be a parent, be an employee. So we can only imagine what that looks like now. This is great. Gonna allow like 10 more seconds. Healthcare, mental health along with that. School, of course, this balancing protections, I would imagine, both for themselves and for their children. Visibility, that's a big one. Okay, so I'm gonna lock it. This is great, right? And the biggest one is childcare. Why wouldn't they be very concerned about childcare? So these are two quotes, from two of our parent advisors, and I'll read them to you just to give you an idea of what is actually at top of mind. So Ariel Ventura-Lazo, he's one of our parent advisors, also attends Northern Virginia. He says, the hard but honest truth, I just don't have enough time to be a good parent, employee, and a student. So again, going back to that time poverty piece. And then from Yaslin, I hope schools can learn from this pandemic and be better prepared to assist the students from families with low incomes in getting the resources they need in a timely manner so they too can continue succeeding in their academics. So as you mentioned, or as you all mentioned before, we definitely have the time piece, but we're also thinking about how students who are parents feel included, especially student parents with low income, and how they're being supported virtually during this time. So now I want to get into some of the supports for student parents that I've seen across institutions. It's important to note that it's hard to know what will be available in a month or 2 months from now, or even when we start back school, hopefully in the fall. But these are some things that I'm seeing now, especially from some of our advisors, what they are planning on doing or have already started to doing. That's creating the community and continuing to support all students and student parents in particular. So the first is morale boosting. It seems minor, right? But during this time when we are trying to physically distance from one another, creating a virtual community is extremely important, and having regular activities continue makes students feel like they are still a part of an institution, like things haven't changed as much as they have. So the biggest things that we're seeing are the virtual graduations. Many institutions have shifted to this model and are becoming really creative about how they do that, but we're also seeing creative approaches to this. Generation Hope, for example, does a virtual storytelling. They just had one last night. So we want to make sure that when we're creating community for our students who are parents, we already know that connecting them with folks who are in a similar situation is helpful. We want to continue to do that in a virtual way too. Second, reducing or eliminating fall tuition costs. Like Yaslin mentioned, for students with low income in particular, COVID is hitting extremely hard because in addition to the other issues with income, now people are losing their jobs or are having to balance taking care of their child while continuing to work, while continuing to go to school. So alleviating some of those costs is really helpful. Seeing where some institutions are waiving tuition for students enrolled during the summer. Some institutions like Portland Community College have prioritized emergency aid for students who are parents. And then some institutions are switching to a flat tuition cost for the fall. Southern New Hampshire University is making their tuition $10,000 in the fall. It'll apply to certain degree programs, but still that offering greatly reduces the weight of this time. Third, shifting to flexible learning models. So we know that due to COVID-19, we are having to take classes online. But we also know that not all students respond well to online courses. One of our parent advisors, Jesus, mentioned that if online classes persist in the fall, he doesn't know if he will continue his education. So creating some hybrid models that bring together some online learning aspects and some in-person parts are going to be helpful for all students, for both students who learn well online and those who prefer to be in person. But also offering a flexibility in the student's progress is helpful. Peloton U has changed their academic progress model, where if you are not progressing in the same way that you were, that is okay. You work with your coach to figure out where you need to reduce your workload to make it easier for you to reach your academic goals. So just being flexible and responsible to the needs of all students is going to be extremely helpful. Expanding supports for students. So the supports that were needed before we began physically distancing are still needed now, and even more so. Students, especially students who are parents, still need cohorts. They still need, services on campus, mental health services, still need access to the internet, more so now, so they can do their work. So a lot of institutions are adjusting to that, providing free Wi-Fi access, again, prioritizing the emergency aid for student parents. And I just learned that Ohio State actually is providing mental health services to the children of their students in the Access program, which is amazing. That's the two-gen approach, in action. And then, of course, we're seeing an increased investment in workforce and non-degree programs. The essential worker is being highlighted now, right? We see a lot of information about essential workers sacrificing themselves to make sure that others are protected. And these essential workers are coming from a lot of non-degree and training programs. So not only is it uplifting the importance of these programs, but it's becoming a viable option for students who are parents who have possibly lost their jobs or are reconsidering whether they want to continue school in the fall. We know that typically during a recession, we see a huge increase in the number of students who are parents that are enrolled, but COVID-19 has changed that because there's a lot of instability with the job market right now. And students are just trying to get back into work. And a non-degree program or training program offers an option for students who are parents that they might not have considered as heavily before. So I'm seeing some institutions bolster those programs or just highlight them in a different way to incentivize students to return to them in the fall. So yeah, those are a lot of the institutional policies that I'm seeing. If you have seen some more, please feel free and share them with me. Here I've linked our COVID-19 response page, the link to Ascend's homepage, and also my email address if you want to follow up or provide any more insights. Thank you.
All right, I guess it's my turn. All right, let's see if I can share my screen. All right. Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you to Access Collaborative and Tracy and her team for inviting me to join everyone. I wish we could be in person together at the conference like we were supposed to be, but unfortunately we can't. And the virtual webinars, I think, are the next best thing. So it's exciting to have a chance to convene with all of you today, even if it is remotely. So I'm Lindsay Reichland-Cruz. I'm a study director at the Institute for Women's Policy Research. And for those of you who are not familiar with us, IWPR is a nonprofit research think tank that's based in Washington, D.C. And we conduct research on a range of issues that are important to women and families with a goal ultimately of establishing economic security and equity for women and girls. And as part of that work, we have a student parent success initiative area of research that I lead. And SPISI, as we call it for short, is focused on raising awareness of the population of undergraduate students who are parents and their experiences in higher education. We know that student parents don't tend to graduate at the same rates as students without children. And we also know that earning a higher education is essential for securing employment with a living wage. So how do we get student parents into higher ed and out the door with a high quality credential that can lead to a good job? We look at these strategies that institutions, that states, that federal policy has established to help support student parents and how they could be improved to increase their completion. And ultimately, we want to build the capacity for serving students with kids among policymakers, among institutional leaders and practitioners, among program leaders, and also learn from those stakeholders as well, and from student parents themselves, because we all know that that lived experience is the real expertise here. So we add our qualitative and quantitative data to that, but we are certainly driven by the experiences of all of you on this webinar. So thank you all for all your work. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the policy considerations around COVID-19 that may affect students with children. You know, Portia said it very nicely. You know, we know that student parents were already vulnerable, and now in this moment, they're even more at risk of being financially insecure, of dealing with housing insecurity or homelessness, of food insecurity, of just the stress and the mental strain of dealing with remote education for kids, for themselves, in addition to possibly still working remotely, or in some worst cases, unemployment. So how do we make sure to safeguard the well-being of student parents and their families now, and make it so that they are able to continue on their pathway to education and to economic mobility, and also, you know, use this moment to build a new system that could be more inviting, more embracing of students with children, since we don't know what the economy is going to look like when we come out of this. And but I don't think that having a post-secondary credential is going to be any less important. So building a system that can support these student parents and their kids is essential. So I'm just going to share a little bit about what we know about the CARES Act, and then go into some of our recommendations for policy at the state, or in the immediate and longer term senses. So a lot of you are probably familiar with this. The CARES Act was passed in late March, and it included you know, massive investment in a number of sectors that affect student parents. I'm just going to talk about the higher ed portion today, but of course, anything having to do with early learning and childcare, and human services programs, et cetera, you know, healthcare, are all going to affect students with kids. In terms of the higher education portion of the CARES Act, we saw about $14 billion invested in higher education, with the majority going from states directly to colleges and universities. There were some set-asides for HBCUs, as well as harder hit institutions, but across the board, those institutional funds are intended to go towards an emergency grant aid to students who need it. You know, DACA students and documented students were excluded. I think this was a major oversight. And, you know, for those of you who have been reading about this, there's a lot of confusion and disagreement within Congress, between Congress and the Department of Education, about whether or not this was intended. But the bottom line is students who need support may not be getting it with these funds. And that's a major problem, and certainly affects student parents and their families. We also are seeing some regulatory flexibility that was introduced through CARES. So for example, if you received Pell for this term, it won't count towards lifetime eligibility, or you know, this term won't be counted towards your satisfactory academic progress for your financial aid. So there are some flexibilities that are going to make it a little easier for student parents and all students who are being affected right now in whatever way. It's not going to be held against them, which I think is obviously huge. We just need to make sure that these provisions last, right? We can't assume that the effects of this pandemic and the economic fallout are going to just be confined to right now. This is going to be lasting throughout the next, you know, the coming months and probably years. And so in understanding how to be supportive of students' progression through higher ed and not punish them for things out of their control is going to be really important. So CARES also suspended loan payments for federal loans. So that's, you know, it's an important step in the right direction. I think we need broad student loan forgiveness across the board. I mean, we needed that before the pandemic. This is, you know, one step that the department took in order to, or that Congress took, I should say, to support students who have loan debt, but this doesn't include private loans. And, you know, eventually they are going to have to start paying them back, and we don't know what's going to happen with the unemployment rates moving forward. So I think that there's definitely still concern there. And then we have seen, I've been hearing wage garnishment has continued in certain cases. There are lawsuits against the department. So just making sure that there's appropriate oversight and accountability for these provisions to make sure students are protected when they need help the most. And then finally, the CARES funds go to all types of institutions. So that means the for-profit colleges who may go after the most vulnerable students, including student parents who are disproportionately represented at for-profits for their federal aid dollars, are going to be included in receiving the CARE funds. And I think there is a risk of misuse, and I think we need to make sure that there is appropriate oversight and accountability for how these funds are used, particularly for for-profits who have been shown to be bad actors in the past. So, like I said, an incredible, a massive investment. Childcare got about, I guess I'm thinking of Heroes, but childcare got some funding in that as well, but just not nearly enough. And I think it was a first step, but it can't be the last. And what we're hearing about the HEROES Act is that it was pretty partisan and that it is going to be pretty much dead in the water when it comes to the Senate. But that means there's more time to figure out what that might look like for students, for student parents, for childcare, for example. And we know that there are big asks for a number of programs within the Department of Education and the major childcare programs in Department of Health to make sure that they get the funding they need. So we'll talk about that next. So in terms of kind of immediate asks, we are hopefully going to be releasing a policy statement soon discussing our perspective on how federal and state policy should take student parents' needs into account. And I think because student parents, 2/3 are living with low incomes or in poverty, 1/3 don't have paid sick days. We know they were already at higher risk of leaving school before graduation. So in a lot of ways, these families and their children, right, represent the nexus of need and also opportunity for support right now that a lot of different sectors are considering. Student parents sit right at that intersection. So prioritizing their needs and how we think about policy moving forward will allow us to check a lot of different boxes for a lot of different populations. So I think that's important to keep in mind. So just to go down the list, more direct cash support to students and students with families, prioritizing those who are most vulnerable, including students with children, as well as other students who are dealing with homelessness and poverty. Undocumented students and DACA students have to be part of this conversation. If there's one thing we've learned from this pandemic, it's that another person's well-being affects your own well-being. And that is certainly true at the collective sense as well. And we can't leave anybody out right now. So we'd like to see a suspension of activity requirements, particularly work requirements when it comes to things like SNAP, food stamps, cash assistance or TANF, and childcare subsidies, because we know millions of Americans are dealing with unemployment and they can't work. They'd love to work, but they aren't, and the jobs aren't there right now. And that's going to remain the case for a while longer. So making sure that access to support, access to food, access to housing assistance isn't contingent on work has to be part of how we respond at the state and federal levels. Balancing remote work for your kids and yourself requires a lot of technology, not just know-how, but the resources, reliable broadband internet, enough tablets or computers so that people can be on their Zoom classes and Zoom calls and all of that at once. That has to be part of this conversation, because I think it's clear that remote learning is going to be a facet of this society for much longer, kind of regardless of the pandemic at this point. So how do we support these families continue on both their kids and their own educational pathways? Affordable housing has to be part of the conversation, and we know that there are student parent families who are in on-campus housing in certain cases, and Autumn Green and her research on family housing availability, paints the picture of what that landscape looks like. So what are those families doing now? How are the institutions helping them make sure that they're able to get access to affordable and accessible, secure housing in this time when dorms may not be open? So I think that's a question we should be asking. Childcare is huge. The Childcare Coalition is asking for a $50 billion investment in early learning, because we know that, frankly, nobody can go back to work. The economy cannot restart if we do not have safe, quality spaces for children. That's just a fact that we have to, we got to put our money where our mouths are in this case. And one thing that we've been thinking about is for the families who are eligible to receive C-Campus or childcare subsidies, whose slots where they would be using those funds are closed, are they able to get, or should they be able to get compensation for the family friend and neighbor care they're now providing or using? I think, we should think about, it's clear, we know this, childcare is work. So we have to consider how we can compensate families for this extra work that they're doing on top of everything else as part of our attempts to keep families afloat in this time. And then longer term, thinking about kind of basically the big structural changes we've needed regardless of the pandemic, but are made even more pressing now that we're facing a possible recession, as well as this health crisis. So increasing Pell Grants to make sure that they are better able to help students meet their financial needs, not just tuition and fees, but all of the other non-tuition costs that come with college enrollment. We just submitted a letter in partnership with Young Invincibles and Higher Learning Advocates to increase C-Campus funding to $200 million. We've been asking for this before, but I think it's more important now than ever. Childcare has to be an answer, to how we get life started again. It has to be there for families, for parents to go back to school, to go back to work. And I loved that poll that Portia did that showed very clearly that childcare is a huge concern right now. So C-Campus, I think, is an important lever to help meet those needs. And it's dedicated funding for student parent families. $50 billion for childcare is essential, or childcare and early learning. But C-Campus can be used as a laser focused tool to really support those families who are in education and trying to get their degrees. So protecting against for-profit predatory practices is going to be essential. Student parents do not have the time or the financial resources to waste on a for-profit institution that is going to confer a degree that doesn't lead to a good job. It just can't be part of the equation anymore. And we have to find a way to protect students from these, and student parents from these practices and these institutions. We saw an uptick in for-profit marketing in the last recession, and particularly now when the for-profit mantra is online education models that work for moms, for working adults. It's going to be a challenge to figure out how we counter message and make sure that quality institutions are getting their messages out there, that they are also accessible and attractive to students with kids. We need to make sure that we've got the funding for higher ed that we need for our institutions to stay open, our quality institutions. States are losing revenue every day at an extremely high rate, and that is going to mean budget cuts. We already know that community colleges are totally under-resourced. And so in order to make sure that we don't see institutions closing that serve our key student populations, we have to increase that investment at a federal level, and also make sure states are doing what they can to maintain services where possible. And then finally, I think we can't deny the fact that some student parents are going to have to leave school right now. They're going to have to take a break because that's just life at this moment. So how do we keep these folks engaged? How do we make it possible for them to re-enter down the road? I think is going to be a question we all need to be thinking about, both at the capital P level and the lower P level, because that need for post-secondary education is not going to go away regardless of if we're remote or not. So making sure we make it possible for student parents to re-enroll is going to be really essential for their family's economic security down the road. Things I didn't mention here that I think Portia mentioned, but just to reiterate, at the institutional level, we're going to need more flexibility, more, campuses that are set up to embrace students with families and who have other considerations that they have to get in line in order to be in class, in order to do their homework, to take those tests. I hope that this will hasten a shift towards a system that is more embracing of student families and more family friendly, because we know that that's it's an essential next step to bring our country, to meet our economic and workforce development demands. So I'll stop there, but thank you again for having me, and happy to take questions. And I didn't put my email in here, but I'm sure Jillian can share it when she shares the webinar, and you're welcome to reach out. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Portia. Thank you both for sharing that. It was a lot of fruitful information, I would like to think. We're going to throw up the slides with your guys's, I think, contact information I have on there as we begin the slides here. So,
am I still sharing my screen?
Yeah.
How do I?
Maybe at the top it'll say stop share. The little red button.
I think my, oh, there it is. It was hiding. My bad. Sorry, everyone. Still learning technology.
Okay.
Sad.
So one question that someone just asked before we even move beyond what you kind of just spoke on the C campus piece, they asked about the funding, since they referenced that they have a childcare on campus. But I wonder more so if you guys could elaborate how policy might have to change to support student parents better, because like we have a childcare on campus, but because our state's restrictions on kids in classrooms is 6 kids for age 3 and under, 9 for preschool through school age. Will policy need to change to accommodate and like give student parents priority over an HR person, or how that might work?
Yeah, so I have been talking with campus childcare directors in different parts of the country, and I am hearing this thought process. And frankly, it's going to have to be an institution by institution, center by center thing to a certain extent. I think there's room for state and federal guidance about how to portion out those slots, since they are going to be so reduced. And of course, we would say that prioritizing the highest need families, which are frankly going to be student parent families in many cases, is an important way to think about that. But clear guidance from states about how to identify these families. And then, if you have equally needy families, how do you choose between those? Randomization is always, something that is inherently fair, but I do think that's going to be really tough. And I don't know. I mean, I think we're just going to have to see how different centers put those policies together and see what works. And yeah, I mean, I wish I had a better answer.
Yeah, and if I can add, I'm also just seeing like partnerships with childcare centers. So institutions that don't already have them on campus or don't have the space on campus, partnering with other local childcare development spaces, but also like having parents work as childcare providers in these centers to kind of offset some of the costs and shift some of the availability for students who are parents too. But it is really tough, and it would have to be institution by institution.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's going to be the way it is, because obviously a lot of institutions don't have childcare, don't have student parent specific childcare. So that I think will be continuing to emerge. And just a small plug, on Friday, we do have a session focused all on C campus that will be more in a meeting setting, so we can all have a better dialogue about that. I want to ask a question, and this might be very opinionated, and that's cool. In our session earlier tonight, or earlier this morning, rather, we talked about how maybe policy changes for parenting students is gaining some type of momentum due to COVID-19 changes, because maybe instructors and professors are recognizing the heightened needs for parenting students. Would you guys agree with the policy change that there's a momentum for parenting students right now?
Portia, you want to take this, or you want me to?
Sure. I think I'll just say a little bit and then you can jump in. So I would say the short answer is yes. Absolutely. And I could be biased because all of our work is around students who are parents, and we are always engaged with folks that are ready to move. But I think that folks are moving in pockets. As much as we want to unite this student-parent support train, it kind of feels like everyone's at a separate station still. But there are areas where folks are really mobilized to do this. Whole institutions are, not just an individual or not just a center at an institution, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure we're all on the same page and everyone's moving in the same direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'd add that I do think that there is momentum around supporting student parents without question. You know, right now, I think my concern is that there are so many needs. There's so many urgent crises in every sector affecting every population across the board that it's going to be hard to be heard for what may be seen as a niche or a smaller population. So I think the tack has to be articulating how student parent families represent all of the populations that we want to help. They intersect with every sector. It's part of workforce development goals. It's part of economic recovery. It's part of hastening, family economic mobility. It's part of helping families of color or low-income communities. Student parents exist in all of these realms, and supporting their success will support the goals that we have for each of those different sectors. And so just painting that picture, articulating that fact, I think is going to be really important to gaining even more momentum among the folks at the top who are making these policy decisions, who control the purse strings, to understand that actually prioritizing this population will meet all their goals, essentially. So, there's a lot of demand for help right now, and I think we just have to keep beating the drum for student parent families and make that case.
Thank you. I agree with both of you. And our campus is, maybe because we were already kind of like having momentum on our campus, it feels like for me we're gaining it, but institution by institution will be different. So one of our attendees posed a question regarding, and this will be a shift away from some of the higher ed things that you highlighted, Lindsay, and more into think about Pell Grant, TANF, and other things that are kind of outside the realm of higher ed, but affect the student parent population. And this question's from Naomi, and she's kind of asking what happens maybe with the graduate students, and how can some of these resources maybe be rewritten or amended to include graduate students more. And I actually would go ahead and add, to what effect should grad students maybe be assisted a little more, since they might have less opportunities for, graduate assistant positions, graduate research positions, and things of the sort?
Yeah, I think I would say, without question, graduate students deserve assistance with daycare, with paying for, all of the things that undergraduates are able to receive. Our focus is on undergraduate students because you have to have that first degree to get the next degree. But yeah, I think that is a real issue. And I saw someone note in a question the fact that graduate students often can't access childcare subsidies. And I think that is a real problem. Frankly, we see a lot of states limit childcare subsidy eligibility to folks who are getting vocational certificates, maybe a 2-year degree, but not necessarily in all fields, for example. And that just, we don't want to not support families who are going after those credentials, but we also want to support them to get higher ones if they want them, because it will artificially limit their earning potential, frankly. If you have to get help paying for childcare in order to go get a bachelor's degree, and you can't get that help because you're getting a bachelor's degree, you're not going to be able to get that degree. You're not going to be able to get the job that comes with it. It's a chicken and the egg thing. But frankly, giving more people the help they need to get through and get those degrees is only going to lessen their need for public assistance down the line and increase the contributions they're going to make to economies in the future as well. So I think there's an economic argument there for sure. It's just states don't want to pay for it. You know, they're trying to limit their welfare rolls, as they like to call them, and that's one way they do it. So I think that there's absolutely room for advocacy there, and you know, I think that's something we should keep talking about.
Any thoughts, Portia?
No, none that are especially different from what Lindsay mentioned. I mean, everyone deserves support. And yeah, I agree that a lot of graduate students are kind of falling through that crack. I think there's an expectation that they are at a certain income level or at a certain something that prevents them from needing the same supports, and that's just not the case. So yeah, I agree with what Lindsay mentioned.
And I have a question for CARES, because there's a few questions that are around it. And maybe it's just a clarifying question, but the question is, how would the CARES funding that parenting students may have received through the stimulus check, or if they're applying for CARES funds through their institution, will that affect their year income and therefore putting like their EFC higher next year?
I do not know the answer to that for sure. I would hope not, but I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know how clear the guidance has been from the department on any of this. I mean, I think when NSPS did a survey of institutions asking them about their experience so far with the CARES funds, distributing emergency grant funds, and basically the large majority said, we haven't gotten clear guidance. It's been incredibly confusing, and the majority haven't distributed the emergency aid yet in part because of that. So I think that's a great question, and NSPS actually may have some resources on their website that could answer that question, but I don't want to say anything that's wrong.
I'm trying to get some questions that are giving us some variety. So here's a question that came up about maybe parenting students beyond college. And I guess I wonder if either if they're working through college or graduating and then going forth, do you think fear around COVID-19 and Corona exposure will make student parents less hireable because they're constantly in contact with their kids who are maybe in contact with other people?
I don't think so. I don't think that students who are parents are at any higher or lower risk of being hired because of that. Even, you know, folks who are working who have children stand to have the same type of interaction, you know, that could prevent them potentially from being hired, but I don't think that'll impact it at all. Yeah, I think altogether, all employers are trying to figure out hiring in general, not just hiring student parents, but how to proceed with hiring. How long will we have to work from home? Do people in general feel comfortable going back out into workplaces? So I think employers are just trying to overcome that association with COVID-19, and that'll probably persist long after we are allowed to go back to work. But I don't think it impacts students who are parents anymore.
Okay. Thank you. And it looks like David Kroom from Aspen also mentioned that the CARES Act won't be taxable. At least they have clarified that, which is helpful to know that that means it won't impact student income for this year going forth. There's a few questions about Tanf funding, and I don't know how well versed you both are in that, but they're asking kind of if there's some lifting for the activity requirements that students have to often do, or participants have to do to receive funding. I don't know if you've seen any policy changes about that, and if they've released like the 28-hour-a-week requirement to receive food stamps or childcare subsidies or things like that.
This is not my area of expertise, so I don't want to say anything misleading. I believe SNAP requirements you still have to be part-time, but I think some of those work requirements have been lifted, at least to an extent. And I do not know about TANF. I think my guess is it's state-based, perhaps with some federal guidance, but I don't know what that is. I'm sorry.
Well, it looks like, and they're answering in the chat too, so which is cool. So Teresa Bell mentioned that states and counties have been offered guidance regarding work requirements, and that they should have been waived, like you kind of mentioned, for some type of time period.
Yeah, it probably depends on the program. Teresa, maybe are you talking about TANF?
I can bring Teresa
TANF, yeah.
Let's see. We have time for probably like one more question. And is there anything burning that you guys need to get off your chest about all of this stuff?
No, I mean, I don't think so. I wish we were able to be at the conference so we could hear how all of you all are experiencing this and supporting your students. Hopefully we'll have time at some point to share those experiences.
Yeah, hopefully moving forward we'll have a more open dialogue.
I know it would be better in person. I've heard many people say this. I think, Lindsay, you said this maybe on a call that we've had before, but when all of the student parent folks get together, it does feel like a family reunion. Everyone knows each other. And so, of course, we lose that element. But it is still nice that you all were able to transition to this. And if I can plug kind of two things. One, in relation to the social services question, there is a webinar happening tomorrow about expanding social services and using data to enhance benefit processing that we've been circulating at ASCEND. So I just shared that with you all in the chat. And the other thing is that there is a session tomorrow featuring Waukesha Wilkerson, who is one of ASCEND's parent advisors. So make sure you tune into that as well.
And I think Waukesha was here too a little bit ago. I saw her on the attendee list. So one question that just popped up in the chat that I think you both kind of alluded to was this fear or trying to help protect students and caution them about the proprietary schools. Can you both elaborate just a little bit more about that and how to either, does that mean we have to provide more funding at the public institutions to keep students from going there? Or is it important better to inform them about proprietary schools that might target them for funding?
I mean, yeah, I think that's absolutely important to think about. Getting information to student parents, to single moms for sure, who may not have, they may not know, when you're faced with lots of choices and you don't have adequate information on how to make that decision, they have some flashy commercials and you've got the single mom who's breastfeeding while doing her math homework at the same time. Like it looks very attractive. So I think making sure that we find ways to communicate what quality institutions look like to students with kids, particularly now, I think is incredibly important. Absolutely. And I don't know exactly how to do that. I think, yes, increasing funding for public and private nonprofit, well, public institutions, I should say, is really important. And I think those institutions have to think about how to market themselves to what they probably consider non-traditional students, but that they need to increase their enrollment. Everybody's going to be dealing with enrollment declines right now. So I think that's, if they're able to show that they can be spaces that are embracing of student parent families, that would do a lot to help them fill those classrooms. And it means that those parents aren't going into predatory environments. And I've seen some of the questions about talking to for-profit administrators to make sure students receive their support. I am probably not best positioned to answer that question since I don't have a ton of expertise around how, for-profits work as institutions. But I think raising that question with the administration, more than one, like making sure that you're getting clear information from your leadership about how CARES funds are going to be used for emergency grant aid to students, and trying to hold them accountable within your institution, I think is really important. Just asking questions. Tell me exactly how those CARES funds are going to be used. How are we going to be providing emergency aid to students? How are we going to get it into their hands? When is it going to happen? I can only imagine that puts pressure on the leadership to be hopefully somewhat transparent and clear about how they're going to administer the funds, and also alerts them that people are paying attention and that they do have their students' best interests at heart.
Agreed. And I want to emphasize the making public institutions more appealing or more open to students who are parents. One of the things that our parent advisors mention often is how they don't see themselves in any of the material. You often see the traditional college student who is fresh out of high school on their own and, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed and all of that. But why aren't there photos of students with their child? That is a huge way in which you can make public institutions more appealing to students who are parents. And I also saw the question about characteristics of quality institutions. In addition to everything that Lindsay said, it's just making sure that that institution has all the supports that you need to succeed, right? Beyond just providing for you to be able to live while going to school, it's about making sure you're able to find a cohort that matches your needs. It's about making sure that they have all of the majors and the advisement that you need in order to pursue the career of your dreams. So I think, when we think about what makes a quality institution, it's everything that would make a quality institution for a student without a child, right? You just want that institution to have some care about your child, or care for the fact that you are also a parent, in addition to being a student, and most likely in addition to being an employee.
Thank you both. I mean, it's quality institutions. I think, the first thing that most of us student parents do, if you are coming into college or you're having a kid in college, you look up what institutions already have programs for you. And so if I could even add one more tidbit, is about institutions that have programs for student parenting, increasing their virtual footprint in the way that it's easier to Google parenting students at XYZ University, because then I can quickly see that there's at least some supports there for me, since we're doing so much online now and virtual support is at a high. I think at this point, we're about 3 minutes left, so we will go ahead and answer the rest of the questions in a follow-up email. Nope, I'm just gonna answer this question out loud. We will be posting this recording onto our website after all of this. And questions and answers will be there as well. Contact information for both Lindsay and Portia will be there for your review later. So Portia and Lindsay, thank you. Thank you a bazillion for coming on here with us, sharing some of that quick knowledge with us, and letting all of us know that we all have these questions and there are great people like you two working on it to help push some policy stuff through in support of parenting students alike. So with that being said, there is a survey for those of you when you close out this webinar. Just answer a few questions for us. It helps provide feedback for the layout, the format, the content, everything that informs future symposium and sessions. I would like to highlight tomorrow at 11 a.m. Ms. Waukesha, who is also on this chat, she will be presenting about from a student parent to a parent advocate. And she has a pretty cool story to share with you all. And that will be in a meeting format. So we'll actually be able to see some of your faces, which will be fun to engage with you. With that being said, if there is nothing else, we will wrap it up.
I just want to say to the person who asked if they should go to college in the fall, I think the answer is yes, if you can. If you think you can do it, you should do it. Absolutely.
I agree. I saw that question and I wondered if we should address it real quick. And I kind of wanted to just say also, because there are a lot of low income students who may not end up in college at the fall, there might be actually a surplus of sorts of funding available, because certain grant funding is still available for low income students or for students who meet certain demographics.
And hopefully they'll be making more funding available in this time. I mean, you know, if you're looking at institutions, I think, Jillian, your advice was perfect. Look for those who are you know, they've got programs for student parents, they've got childcare, and even if you can't get a childcare slot immediately, just knowing that institution has supports available is a real important step in the right direction. And if you are thinking about college in the fall, I definitely encourage you. There are programs out there. There is support out there. So that's all.
Thank you both. And I saw your question. We're going to come back to these C Campus questions in our session on Friday. So I don't want to steal away from our speaker, Ms. Haley Myers-Dillon, on Friday. We will be back here at 11 a.m. on Friday. Join us in the C Campus session. We will have a very good dialogue on C Campus funds, how to use them, and all those things.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Everybody have a great rest of your day.
Have a great day.
11 a.m.
Bye. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.